I enter?
I can't let you in at the moment.
Will it be possible to be admitted at a more convenient time for the club?
It is possible, but not at the moment. If you're so drawn to it, try and force your way in. Got any money?
Yes, I have money. Is that what you want? Money? Why didn't you just ask for that in the first place, man? Here, it's not much, but it's all I've got.
I'll take your money, because I don't want you to feel you left anything untried. You keep the quarter. You still have to wait a few minutes.
Come on. Why doesn't he have to wait a few minutes?
Tonight is Mohawk night. If you had a mohawk, you could go in.
Oh, come on. We're both adults. Why don't you just let me in?
You really want to go inside?
Yes, you know, it's very important. I've got people in there. They're expecting me. Why don't you just let me in?
You sure?
Yes, I'm sure.
Hello there.
Hello there. To get us in the mood, I thought I should have had it queued up. Hold on a second.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about.
Let's talk about what this podcast is. This is our episode 0 of The World is Wrong, our introduction episode. I'm Andras Jones, and you are...
Bryan Connolly.
And this is called The World is Wrong, which is a negative title, but it is a supremely positive show. What are we here to do, Brian?
We are here to celebrate the movies that are maligned, the movies that people hate, the movies that people ignored, the movies that people didn't even know they were around to ignore. And we want to champion those motion pictures.
Yes. There are so many of them. When we were making our lists, at first I pitched this idea to you, and then I thought, well, am I going to hit the wall at about like 10 that I really want to talk about? And no, my list goes on and on. And I'm a huge consumer. I've listened, we'll talk about it later in this, but I listen to a ton of film podcasts, and most of the films that are on both of our lists are films that even some of my favorite film podcasts haven't covered. It's just really, so yes, we're here to geek out and get excited about, and get you, the listener, excited about the films that we're excited about, right? Basically, and your background, I think your background as far as as having access to a lot of movies makes you a really unique resource, Brian. You were the manager of Vulcan Video in Austin for how many years?
Oh, gosh. Almost 10 years. I mean, I worked there for 12, but I was manager for maybe 8-9 years. That's a long time. For the 21st century, that's a long time for a video store manager.
And you were already a huge film nerd / scholar. You've been you've been a one of the most fun people to talk about film with since I met you. And when I met you, you were pretty young. You had to be in your early 20s.
Oh, younger. I think when we met, I was, no joke, 18 years old.
and you were already, at that point, were you already organizing All Freakin' Night at the Olympia Film Festival?
Yeah, I think we were in the first year of that one. Yeah, and that was the all-night horror marathon that we would do every Olympia Film Festival every year. It was a good time.
And so we sort of jumped in a way that would be confusing cinematically from you managing a video store in Austin, which you did for 10 years. And people who are on it. Vulcan Video is one of those classic pre-blockbuster to post-blockbuster kind of havens for just cinematic, for the love of cinema that exist in some lucky cities, and fewer and fewer. And unfortunately, Austin lost Vulcan this last year for reasons we may get into in other podcasts, but let's not go down that road. But the point is that you had access to all this. You were able to have access to all of those films, and you're the kind of person who consumes a ton of films. But before that, you lived in Olympia, Washington. And what we're saying is at the young age of 18, you were already programming all-night horror film nights at the Olympia Film Festival with your partner in crime, Zach Carlson.
This is correct. And I just want to shout out to Zach. He, at one time in his life, had a similar idea for podcasts like this, but realized that he hated podcasts, and he never did it.
Well, great minds think alike, and then ambitious people take it a little bit further. Or people with lower standards. I don't know. But you and Zach, and I was lucky. I acted in the rock opera, the Olympia rock opera, The Transfused with Zach, and that's how I feel like I got to know him the best when you're acting in a production, especially a production like that. Someone should make a movie about the making of The Transfused. That would be amazing. It was in the turn of the millennium, a trans and also disabled and also punk rock and also queer rock opera about a revolution in a post-apocalyptic future. And Zach played one of actually, I think he played the role I turned down of the corporate bad guy. And then I got to play the role of Z, the submissive male soldier who has a moment of awakening in the film. In the play. Anyway, the point is that was a heady era for art in Olympia when you were able to do all that. And we just, and when you were in Olympia, you weren't just programming the film festival, you were also making your own films. What was the name of the cop film you made?
The cop film I made was called The Savage Streets, and it was made out of, which is not it's a comedy, but that's not a comedy title. And I found out later that title was already used for a movie that was definitely not a comedy with Linda Blair. But I made that. It was I made it before Reno 911, and it's basically that. It's just what if there was what if it was like Police Academy, but done like the show Cops, and they were a bunch of idiots, and it was a good time. But actually, that was the third feature I made. I made my first feature when I was 13 in Olympia with my friends and my brothers. And then I made my second feature when I was 20 called The Great American Disease, another hilarious title.
Oh, yeah.
And, the rest is history. No.
And you're still making films, and you're still writing. I guess I'm interviewing you first because I don't know why, because I just fell into that mode. But so you make other films, but you also are a writer of film books. You and Zach.
Yeah. What's
the name of I'm sorry, I don't have it at the ready. The punk rock.
We made the book called Destroy All Movies: The History of Punk in Motion Pictures, and we just basically decided to watch every movie ever made in the 20th century and find the punks in them. Even if they're in the background of a Bette Midler movie, that counted. And we just compiled that into this insane OCD nightmare called Destroy All Movies. And I'm very proud of it. It may be my life's work. I don't know. It might be my masterpiece. I have no idea. But,
do you want to talk about what you're currently working on? Because what you're currently working on is... actually, we're going to disclose that at the end of this, because I want you to be thinking about what would be the perfect follow-up to that book. And when we tell you what it is, I think it's going to be better. It's going to be even better than your idea, whatever it is. But listeners, do try to ponder what would be how would you follow that up? Destroy All Movies, because that is such an undertaking. And I also want to say, this is why I'm so excited about this. Imagine that you have someone with that level of access to films and that level of devotion to willing devotion to even a completely insane endeavor like that, all in the service of maybe just the kind of people who would listen to a podcast like that. That's who I'm talking to in Bryan Connolly. So just If in the future we ever disagree, I just want you all to know what a resource it is to have Brian here, and that the disagreement comes entirely from a place of supreme respect. Now, and of course, when Brian met me and he was 18, of course he was starstruck.
Well, I remember when I met you, and I think this is right, where I was at my house. And I was going for New Year's Eve. Every New Year's Eve we would have movie marathons at my house, and we would just kind of obsessively be like, "We're going to watch all of blah blah blah." And then one year we were going to do every Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And Zach was like, "Well, the guy from Part 4 lives here." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know him." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "I'm going to have him come by." And I'm like, "No, you aren't." And then I believe you did come by when we were doing that, if I remember it correctly, just for a second. I don't even think you watched anything. You were just like, "Hello, yep, it's me. Goodbye."
Yeah, I hate watching myself on film. It is no fun. And I had much more fun at a later film festival when you did the Monkey Film Festival, or was it the Primate Film Festival?
There was every movie with a monkey that wore people's clothes in it. But I remember that, and I don't remember how we actually became friends. It was just sort of like,
how can you not become friends when you've got all that? When you're sharing monkey movies, come on.
But I think Olympia to me must, my experience of growing up there must be what people get out of high school or college, which I didn't get, where it's sort of like you meet all these lifelong people that that are influence you and are part of your life always. No matter where we go in life in this world, you have that group of the Olympians that we all kind of experience this thing together. And it's such a small town. It really does kind of feel like the hallways of a high school. It's really just 2 streets and there's 3 places to hang out. So you're just going to know everybody, especially you more than anyone else other than Zach, knew as much about movies and was seen to have as much fun talking about it than anyone else. And I think that's kind of how a lot of my friendships end up being. It's you and me, we can talk for hours about blah, blah, blah in this movie. And I just that's this, I guess, because we're old, this is pre people on the internet doing that so much. So it's we would sit in, the Reef, which was a diner in Olympia, and let's talk about movies for a few hours, because why not? This is a fun way to spend a day. And you and I think have had some of the best movie conversations, which is why I'm excited to be doing this podcast.
Yeah. I should say I have this other podcast that I host. We both host different podcasts, and we'll definitely be talking about yours. I don't know if my podcast will be very germane to our conversations, other than that it's based on synchronicity. So I have this show called Radio 8 Ball where we answer questions by picking songs at random and interpreting them like musical tarot cards. And I've been doing it for 20 years, and it started on KAOS in Olympia. And we've had lots of really cool guests, and I'll put all stuff in the links for people who want to go down that rabbit hole. But my point is that in preparing for this, I've been having all these just insane level of synchronicities. And it's just, that's to me a reflection of of inspiration and a sense of being in the right place at the right time and just feeling like, ooh, this is exciting. Is there anything else we should say about how we know each other?
I think I want to talk about you for a second, because you were very nice to talk about me. Just so so listeners know. So because you were an actor in the 80s and 90s.
You never stop being an actor, son.
But that's when you started.
Yes, I started in my teens. Yes,
in your teens, and you were in not Saved by the Bell, but the show before Saved by the Bell.
Good Morning, Miss Bliss. I played Deke, the illiterate bully.
Deke. There was once a band named that, I believe.
Really? Oh yeah,
I think so.
I did hear
named
about
after that character.
My career is so weird. I have okay, go on. Yes, you keep you.
And your Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which is a big deal, and you're great in that movie, by the way. If no one, I don't know why anyone has not seen that, but if you haven't, it's definitely one of the better sequels of that franchise, without a doubt. And And then also I'm a big fan of the sorority babes in the Slime Bowl Bowl-orama, which is a master. I remember watching that movie as a young man, maybe it was USA Up All Night when I first saw that. And you're in this tons of stuff. You're always in movies. So are you from Olympia and then you went to Hollywood, or how did you end up in Olympia? Or is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Olympia. Yeah, my father was one of the founding faculty at the Evergreen State College. So I moved out. I moved here when I was like 2 years old. I moved around a bunch when I was a kid. Born in Santa Cruz, moved to Medford, Massachusetts, and then back to Olympia. And then I lived in Olympia from 1970 through 1981, and then went to high school in Massachusetts. And that's where, like, I learned about film and loved film. And we could talk about watching movies in downtown Olympia. I could definitely write a short story about going to movies in downtown Olympia. And so that's where I really learned to love film. But it wasn't until I went to the East Coast and hung out in a world that was a little bit more creative. Olympia was in the 70s and 80s, was not the cultural hub it became for a brief and shining moment in the 90s. And that's where I met other people who were actors, and I went to schools that had acting programs and got to write plays, and then I moved right out of high school to LA and got very lucky and just acted in a bunch of things. And then I don't know how deep we want to go into my acting career, but yeah, I got to act in a bunch of films, and I still feel like it's one of those things where I got a little peek behind the curtain of this thing that I loved for a brief moment. And that I've always had once you're in, you always have a little bit of a toe in, especially if you're in something like Nightmare on Elm Street that has this whole culture behind it, and horror films that have this whole culture behind it, like Sorority Babes, and films like even Saved by the Bell itself has they all have their own cults. And so I think I want to lean into talking about that, because I think I've been thinking about what do I bring to this, and I think that's one of the things that I think I can bring is a little bit of an insight into a lot of when people talk about, particularly about acting in films. There's a lot of conjecture that I feel like when I listen to film podcasts, like people are really good at talking about photography because people do photography, and people are really good at talking about the story and structure because people can do story and structure, but actually acting in a movie and doing and working with that's more of a rarefied experience, especially when it's not just your friends. When it's like there is a difference between making a film with your friends and making a film where they know that there's millions of dollars on the line and it's going to come out. And there are movie stars in it and all these people who have all these other things going on. And so having had that glimpse into it, when we get into our lists, you'll kind of see that my list as a film fan, the way I watched films changed once I got my toe in there. And maybe it's similar for you as a director. Like once you've actually directed a film, there's a way you're never gonna look at a film again the same.
It's very true. It's very true. It's like why I'd imagine chefs have a different perspective, like when they eat at Arby's or something. It's like, wait, I can make 4-star meals. Here's my opinion of the McRib.
Right. Your obsession with the McRib eludes me, but it's the kind of thing that makes you an interesting filmmaker. So, and I guess I've just to like put my resume out there. So I've acted. I still consider myself an actor in everything I do. To me, it's like a practice. Like you never stop being a martial artist once you've trained to do that. You're always sort of in training a little bit. But I also work as a manager I work for a management company that works with actors and writers and directors, and I've written one unproduced screenplay that I don't think anyone will see because now it seems really weird. and things have changed so much in the last few years. And maybe we can talk about that on a future episode, but that's my resume. And then I guess I'm someone who loves, I watch movies. I'm watching stuff constantly, movies, TV shows. I don't know if I can keep up with you, Brian, but I definitely find myself in most cases being the one who, when people say, what was that film from the 70s with Elliot Gould? And I know what they're talking about. Even though there's like 12 films to talk about, I can tell from the context of the conversation that they're referring to, The Long Goodbye. What's the one where there's naked women? Oh yeah, The Long Goodbye. Robert Altman. And people are annoyed. They're like, why do you always have to be that person? But this is a safe space for us to be that person.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're going to talk. I think it's important to for the listeners to know who they're listening to when you're talking about film. Like maybe there's probably half the people have already decided, no, this isn't for me.
I hate these guys.
But if you're still with us, then
I think this is a great idea for an episode. I think I like the idea of we're gonna go on a bunch we're gonna go on a bunch of dates with you guys, but first let's just get to know each other over some coffee, because you might not want to go on a date with us. So let's just get to know each other. And then go into the actual episodes of the podcast where we can dig into some movie, because you might not care what we have to say if you don't agree with the kind of things we're into or who we are, which is fine, And I like this. I think this is a great way into this world, this podcast world.
Cool. Well, actually, why don't we? I'm going to jump ahead on our list of things we were going to hit, because I think this is a really good point to talk about our film resources, since we're
Sure.
letting the listeners know where we're coming from. Do you want to start with that? I have an extensive list, but I'm curious.
If you have an extensive list, why don't you go first? Because I have a brief list, so I want to hear let's get the extensive one out of the way.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to list my favorite film podcasts, mostly because I listen to a bunch of them, and it definitely informs the way I'm thinking about this. There will be films that, if I'm aware that someone else has covered something, if I feel like they've hit all the points that we'd hit, I'd rather just recommend people check them out there. So I want to be doing a lot of giving credit where credit is due, because I'm a huge fan of these podcasts that I'm about to mention. So the first one that I absolutely recommend so highly to anyone who loves films is You Must Remember This. It's already super popular. People may already be aware of it, but it's deep historical explorations of Hollywood's 20th century, and without being specifically a feminist film podcast, because she's looking at it a lot of times through even when she does an episode on Howard Hughes, that's the many loves of Howard Hughes. So it's great. So she builds a thing around Howard Hughes because that's what gets us in, but then she gets to do episodes about all these different women who he either helped or didn't, or in some transactional way. And she did a history on the blacklist in Hollywood and on Manson's Hollywood. And she's Ryan Johnson's partner. So she gets really great actors to come in and sometimes read the part of these people when they're doing they'll say, oh, and Jack Warner said this. And then Patton Oswalt will be there reading Jack Warner or something like that. So it's super high quality. And if you haven't listened to it, there's so many episodes. You're in for a treat. I'm waiting on the next episode. She's currently doing one on Polly Platt, a whole series on Polly Platt, who was Peter Bogdanovich's partner when he was making his best films, and went on to work on some other great films that they talk about, I don't know. I'm going to go down. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole on all of these, but you can hear how excited I am about that one. And I guess that where that's going to inspire this is just it wants to make me very rigorous about how we are when we're dealing with history on the podcast. The next one is some friends of yours at the Pure Cinema podcast. They are the best source for the kind of thing that we are doing, I think, which is finding these hidden gems that are not necessarily hidden, are not necessarily acclaimed. And they're working with Quentin Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema in Hollywood. And so they sometimes have Tarantino on, which is an amazing resource for them. They do episodes about the New Beverly's calendar that Tarantino programs when they were showing movies. And just huge respect to them. And a lot of times I definitely feel like we're going to be working hard to try and avoid stepping on their toes in terms of what they've covered, unless there's something that we really feel like, oh, well, they only hit that. Some stuff they just give passing glances to, and maybe we want to go deep on. Next up is the projection booth. It's very in-depth scholarly criticism of just focusing on one film. Sometimes the host, Mike White, a lot of times he'll get the scripts for films and have read multiple different versions of the scripts, read the source material. He gets interviews with a lot of great people when he's talking about films, and he'll go into some very, like, if you go and check it out, there'll be films that you'll be like, oh, wow, 2.5 hours on The Swimmer. Yeah, sign me up. That's just amazing. So, and there's so much good stuff there. Joe Dante has a podcast with Josh Olson. It's called The Movies That Made Me, and it's basically about what we're going to do in just a minute, which is someone comes in and lists the films that were deeply influential to them, and they have great people from around the film world who are professionals in the film business. And Josh is the guy who wrote History of Violence. I don't know if I said that, but they have very thoughtful commentary, not even commentary, just exploration of what films are important to people. And in a way, I feel like the tone of that is very much influential on what I want to achieve here. Sorry, there's a bunch here. So we got to go through them though, because they will be referenced. The next one up is the Michaud Mission. Their goal is to cover every Black film ever. And when you listen to my list, you'll hear that there is a huge, there's not a lot of Black film on my list. And so if you're like me and you want to explore, deepen your awareness of what even Black cinema is, because that's one of their big things, is what makes something a Black film. Like the debate, like, is Django Unchained a Black film? Well, it's Tarantino. Like, some people would say it's not because it's Tarantino, but clearly it is. So I just feel like that's a really interesting debate, and it's exciting. There's a great, I got to give a shout out to Ticklish Business. They do mostly films from the 30s, and I'm sort of somewhere into a collaboration with Kristen Lopez, who hosts the show on a podcast focusing just on Warren Beatty, which is something I'm pretty obsessed with. And that's another one that I highly recommend. There's 4 more on this list. I'm just going to keep going through it. Sorry, Brian.
I'm enthralled.
So then there's another one called the Bechdel Cast, which is there's a couple of comedy podcasts. Usually I don't like comedy podcasts about film because they usually are just people who are not very smart about film being mean and dumb. But there are a couple of really smart ones. One is the Bechdel Cast. It's a comedy podcast where 4 comedians who are somehow involved in the film business apply the Bechdel test to films throughout history. And you'd be surprised which ones barely pass or don't pass at all that you'd think certainly would. And then the Flophouse, which is some former Daily Show writers making fun of dumb movies in smart ways. And that's a very popular podcast. And even though they're doing exactly what I said I didn't like, they're very smart about it and very loving about it. And so, to the point where they've had directors that they ragged on Twilight 2, and since then the director of Twilight 2 has become a regular guest on the show. And so that's how nice they are. And finally, there's a really it's pretty popular, so it doesn't need a shout out, but the Next Picture Show, where 4 reviewers pair a new film with an old film where they go together. Like they just paired The Haunting with Shirley. So they did 1 week on The Haunting and 1 week on Shirley. And I'm sure they just record them together, but that's a great podcast. And finally, Show Me the Meaning, which is a podcast that I'm putting last because it should be featured because what they're doing is really awesome, but also they infuriate me. I won't say which one of them, but one of their hosts, I just get so angry at when I listen to them because he's so like people so confidently wrong. But what they do is philosophical dissections of films that are both like they'll talk about Inception, and they'll talk about it really about the philosophy behind it. It's best when they're doing this. Sometimes they get into talking about the quality of it, and that's when it bugs me. But when they're talking about just, it's interesting if you look at it philosophically in this way, what they're doing archetypally, and it's very smart and nerdy. And if they're doing a film that you love and that guy's off that week, you'll love it. And then I just have two books really quickly. Danny Peary's The Alternate Oscars was a really big influence on me. And David Thompson's A Biographical Dictionary of Film, which just even the title influenced the way I'm approaching our lists, that what I want to do when I share my lists of my favorite, it's not like what's my favorite or even what I think is the best, but what will tell you what is my personal biography in film. How can I reveal myself in terms of my taste so that when listeners are like, oh, he doesn't like ... which I don't, you're probably never going to find out what I don't like, because if I don't like it, I'm not going to talk about it. But anyway, so that's my really long bibliography, and it still doesn't include so many things, but we'll get into those in the course of talking about this show.
So for me, I there's a lot of people. There's people that I'm drawn to that really inspire me in the movie world, that write about movies and talk about them in a way that has really inspired me. And I'll start with the obvious one, which is my good pal Zach Carlson, we've talked about already. He has always been such a champion of there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. If you like it, that means it's good, and you don't have to apologize for it, and you don't have to, you don't have to keep it a secret. Be proud that Good Burger is your favorite movie or whatever, And he made a great show for Vice called Outsider that is just kind of meeting and hanging out with these sort of unknown filmmakers that made these great movies that nobody cared about. And it's such a good show, and I highly recommend anybody watch it. It's on YouTube, I believe. It's fantastic. I think also I really love the website Bleeding Skull, and Zach writes for that, but also Joe Ziemba and Annie Choi. And that's a website that champions movies that most people would think is just scummy, shitty, straight-to-video garbage from the 80s and 90s, horror mostly. But they champion it. And
my films.
But they look at it as if they're real movies, and it's not in an ironic way. And they really are just well, these are movies too. These are made by people too. And I mean, a lot. It's easy for people to dismiss movies, and we'll talk about this all the time with every episode. But it actually is hard to make any movie. It's not an easy task for anybody. And these people made these movies. It's a lot of people that are thinking crap. But this website is no, these movies are worth noting. You might think they're garbage, but here's what's interesting about them. And so that website, the best. And Joe Ziemba also runs AGFA out of the Alamo Draft House, and they are a great company, and they put out great DVDs and Blu-rays and help make film prints and things for just movies that haven't had a release yet and movies that should be seen by people. And so I really love AGFA, and anything with their stamp on it is great. The author, Stephen Thrower, is amazing. He did the insane task of watching every Jess Franco movie ever made, a director made about 500 movies, and and he went through all of them and gave them each its equal amount of respect. And he is definitely one of the top film writers. And then Kayla Janice is another writer where she puts books. I don't know how she has the time. She makes book after book after book, and she just always writes about movies that no one else would want to talk about, like horror, Euro horror, crazy, stuff from the 70s and 80s that you just don't even think about thinking about. And she talks about them endlessly in so many books, and it's the best. And kind of the two famous guys that I really love and have always loved, one is Jay Hoberman, film critic. I think it was The Village Voice is what he wrote for. Is that right? I'm not sure. But he's great because he never wrote a review that I read where he was like, I hate this or I like this. He was just always this is interesting, and here's why. And I feel that's how I like to think about all movies. I never want to go in being like, I hate this or I like this. I want to be like, there's something here, and what is it? And then what's interesting is the other inspiration is the opposite, is Roger Ebert, who, that did the thumbs up, thumbs down way of doing movies, which I totally disagree with. But his writing is the best. I think he is my favorite film writer, which is sad because it's like saying you like the Beatles, because it's like he's the most famous film critic ever, probably, is Roger Ebert. But man, his writing's good, and he would always he'd surprise you by giving like 4 stars to a movie that nobody else would. Like, I remember when that crazy Nicolas Cage, Alex Proyas movie Knowing came out, Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars and said it was one of the best pictures of the year, and he was the only one even close to that opinion. And I admire him for that. He was a fearless man, and he also wrote for Russ Meyer, so like that gives him an extra bonus point. And so those are kind of like the things that I look to, like those are the people that I look to, and any output that those people are involved in, I will champion till death.
Nice. There's a lot of folks there that I don't know, and let's each compile lists with links to these folks, so that when we post this eventually, we'll just have that in the show notes. If you can.
Great idea.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we both spend a fair amount of time thinking about film.
We're lucky.
So, okay. So, you know what? I want to change things up a little bit. It makes me think that I think the first thing we should do is we've broken this down into 3 lists of favorites. We have sort of like the greatest, like our film, like who's on our Mount Rushmore of film, or I don't necessarily want to talk about Mount Rushmore, but it plays into the history of film, so why not? But who like creates our cinematic vocabulary, and then what's the most influential, which is definitely more of a personal thing, and then what's our favorite, which I think is more like who are we following, who are you excited to when their next thing comes out, like, or in some way, like there's something that's a little bit more current about the favorite list, I think. Are we on the same page on this?
Sure.
I mean, okay, we both have different ways of interpreting this list, which is fine. I think I don't want to enforce the way, so that's how I approach this list.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like whenever I'm tasked to do a list like this, it's just like, it drives me mad, because for people like us, it's really hard. It's like if you really love movies, if you really are like, I'm a movie fan, then you could not pick one favorite movie.
No way.
There's no way. There's no way. You're going to have a million of them. And honestly, like what I say today will change next week, because my mind is always like, well, but then there's this. Well, there's this. Because like we've eaten so many movies, and like some are so far deep inside us that we don't even remember, and then they'll just pop up. Like, I kept changing this list so many times just in the last 24 hours. Like, the piece of paper just looked like the Warren Report. It was just like this complete, everything moved around, scratched out. Like, my God. But I think I'm happy with what I have. But you know what? I bet it isn't even true. I think it's going to change every day.
That is fine. I think that's what I'm saying. This is a snapshot of where we are now. I guess the way I would think about it is that the first 2, like the 5 for me, like the 5 greats, that's not going to change anytime soon.
Agreed.
Or the 5 most influential isn't really going to change, because I'm not going to be influenced again. But the favorite list, and what I did, I broke. So you should feel free to. I broke the rules of this list in many ways. I am not going to just limit I'm going to find ways to have honorable mentions or double nominations for, I mean, my favorites list is like, has a whole bench so, and there's going to be some crossover. The whole point of this is just for a way for us to, like, I think, let each other know, because I think it's a fun exercise. I did learn something from doing this. I was really surprised who topped my greatest list.
Me too. Yeah, that was like, I looked at it and I was like, wait, who am I? Like, okay. I thought I knew, but I surprised myself. And I guess for the sake of time, so this isn't an 8-hour podcast, we're not going to dwell too much on our list.
No.
But we'll definitely, in the many episodes to come, we'll definitely be referencing these things, and it'll be in our heads, So it's like we're going to just go through maybe a little side comment, but we don't have the time to dwell on all 10,000 movies that we're going to talk about.
I think the main thing is just, again, this is a snapshot of who we are. And I think probably, like, if you're listening to this and what we're about to say is like, oh, I love those things, or I'm interested in those things, that'll be good, because that's what we're going to be getting into in the course of this podcast. It's going to influence our choices and the films we're going to explore and the way we're going to talk about them. And if you listen to it and you're like, wait, I don't hear any of the things I like on there, then, you should go and find a...
Goodbye.
I'm not. I had so many names go through my head based upon listening to your podcast of trying to imagine a director that you wouldn't like, but I would never want anyone to do that to me. And since we're not going to be talking negative, let's just say if you don't hear someone you like, I hope by the time this comes out, we'll have some way to get in touch with us, and you can definitely reach out and say, why isn't this person on your list? And we might say, God damn, they should be. Or we might say, because... that's one of our blind spots, which we're going to be getting to. So, so why don't we start with the most influential, like the 5-ish most influential? And do you want to go first? How do we want to do this?
Sure. Yeah. Like maybe we do. Do you want to do it back and forth, or should I just go? Here's my 5, and then you can comment on it.
With the influential, let's just go with the 5, because I want to let's get to know Bryan Connolly's in 5.
Okay.
His influential films. Okay.
I'm going to go in chronological order of my life, because this was actually the easiest of the 3 lists, because there are 5 movies that are always there. I remember that day. I remember when I watched that. I remember the feeling I got, and me being a person who wants to make movies and make movies. To me, it felt like when you play a video game and you go up a level, and you're like, oh, I've now I've gained something. So, the obvious, and some of these are a little obvious, and I think a lot of people can agree on these. But the first one for me, based on my age and when I grew up, was Pulp Fiction. And that movie changed my life. I saw it when I was 14. And before then, I really think of my life as I like the movies before Pulp Fiction, and then I like movies after Pulp Fiction. and then also with that movie comes Tarantino, and comes this film obsessive, another guy who champions not the movies that you normally heard people champion. So that's also kind of the beginning of where we're at with this podcast, is my love of Pulp Fiction. Then, when I first saw Jerry Lewis's The Bellboy.
Is this where we register?
Yes, sir. Right this way.
Hold it. Hold it. Hold. Back. Hold it. Back. Hold it. Hold it. Hold it! Stop with the brushing. Now, we've been together a long time. I've asked you many, many things, and you've come up fat for me. But now I'm asking you to hold it. Stop pushing, stop rushing, just hold it. Now, we're all adults, and I'll expect you all to conduct yourselves in such a fashion as an adult will. Hold it. I've never asked you this, but I'm asking you now simply, purely, hold it! I'm a nervous wreck. Let me have a cigarette. Thank you. A light? Do I have a...
Yes, sir.
All right. Hold it! Stop with the brushing. Let me have another cigarette, please. I'll smoke it dry.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lewis. We're all quite excited about your appearance at the Fontainebleau.
That blew my mind. It changed my life for good, forever, for good and bad. And that was just sort of like, oh, you can make movies like this. Okay, you can make comedies like this. Oh, okay, this guy is amazing, and I'm on this wavelength. So and I saw that for the first time at 6 a.m. after being up all night, chasing my drunk roommates and trying to stop them from doing vandalism. That was a very memorable night. Then, when I first saw Blake Edwards' 10, that was just like, oh my God. Wait, no, that's how you can make a comedy. That's how you can make a slapstick comedy for grown-ups. I didn't know that was a thing. And that just blew my mind. And that's probably, out of these 5, the movie I'm most obsessed with. Like still, like I think about that movie literally every day. Like I wake up and then tennis is in my head, and then by the end of the day, hopefully it's like gone down a bit. And then the movie Beau Travail by the great Claire Denis. The ending of that movie, it is the best ending I've ever seen in any movie ever. And I've never saw the end of a movie where I just like couldn't function for like a month because I was just like couldn't stop thinking like, that's how you end a goddamn movie. Oh my God, that's amazing. And then the final one, the most recent one, is Blissfully Yours by the filmmaker at Pichapong Weerasethakul. And that is sort of like, that is one of the most brilliant pieces of slow cinema. The opening credits don't even start until like the 45-minute mark. And I was just like, this is one of the best movies they've ever made. And I recently made a feature this year, and I couldn't stop thinking about that movie while making this new movie, because there's something about his film language that's so unique and interesting that I'm like mad obsessed with it. So that's my 5 up until 2020.
Well, that's great. There's things on that I haven't seen. I wanted to ask you, because it's not on my list, but it's one of the things that could or should be. Did you see Pulp Fiction when it came out, or did you see it at the Dollar Theater in Olympia?
Because of my age, I did not see it in the theater, but I remember as a kid, because that was like the movie where I was obsessed with it before I saw it, because I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly at the time, because I was like, I like movies, I must read Entertainment Weekly. And so I built up that movie for like a year, and I was obsessed with it. Like I actually hung like pictures of it on my wall. There was something that was like, I know I'm going to love this movie. I haven't seen it yet, but goddamn, I know this is going to be my movie. And I remember driving through downtown Olympia, and the line for the Dollar Theater screening of Pulp Fiction like went around the block. I've never seen a line that long.
I was in that line. I saw it that night. The night it opened at the Dollar Theater in Olympia, and it was one of the great. Like there are a few we could talk about some, but that was one of the great cinematic experiences of my life, was being in that theater for $1. And I made the mistake of drinking coffee before, so that film is already so tense, and I was just like.
But I made my mom rent it for me for my birthday that year when it came out on video in 1995, and me and my friends watched it. My parents were, of course, like deeply disturbed. They're like, "Why are you watching this movie?" And I'm like, "This is the best movie I've ever seen." And I would just watch it like once a week. I bought the VHS, and every Saturday, make myself a bowl of cereal, watch some Pulp Fiction. That was just like 1996 to 1999. That was my life. That's what I did.
Wow. Well, I got to say, I respect your list a lot more than mine. Mine is much more about it's more about personal autobiography, and it's also about like my relationship with film. And definitely there's an act. I come at it more as an actor. Like these are all films that inspired me when I was definitely an amateur, like wanting to be out in LA doing this thing. So great list. Insert applause. And I haven't seen Beau Travail or Blissfully Yours, so it's a perfect list because it has three ones that it makes sense, but I would never have thought of Pulp Fiction and The Bellboy and 10 together. But it makes me want to see these other two films so badly. So I'm looking forward to that. I doubt there's going to be anything on my list you haven't seen. So,
you don't know that?
I'm pretty sure. So it's pretty obvious because it's stuff that I saw when I was just where movies were hitting me. I wasn't really looking for them particularly. Well, at some point in this I started, so I'll explain. So I did it chronologically, and I'm older than you. I was 10 when Star Wars came out. So that sort of places me in cinematic history, and that plays a big role. The year Star Wars came out was my big awakening in film. And there's three films that I associate with that year, which is like 76, 77, that were really big for me. The first was The Bad News Bears. Was like,
oh man.
All right, boys. Let's go. Up, everybody up. Practice. Come on. All right. I'm an asshole. Go ahead and yell. Get it off your chests. I deserve it.
We really appreciate these new uniforms, Buttermaker, but we're not going to be needing them anymore. We've been taking a lot of razzing in school about opening day, and they were laughing at us, picking on us. Anyway, we took a vote and decided that we'd quit.
What the hell happened to you, Tanner?
Tanner got into a fight because of it.
Who with?
The 7th grade.
What?
The 7th grade.
Took on the whole 7th grade? You want to quit, Tanner?
God, no, I want to play ball.
I can understand how you guys feel. I haven't been much of a manager or much of anything else for that matter. I'm sorry. But this quitting thing, it's a hard habit to break once you start. You're a damn good bunch of boys. Probably deserved a lot better than me. But it looks like we're stuck with each other. Jimmy, grab a bat. Engelberg, get your gear on, get behind home plate.
What for?
We need to practice.
But we disbanded the team. We took a vote.
God damn it! Nobody's vote counts around here but mine. Get your gear on and get your fat ass behind a plate before I kick it up there. The rest of you pansy-ass quitters, move your asses before I kick them all on deck. Get in position. We got a game with the Athletics next Wednesday, and that means only one thing: bad news for the Athletics!
a huge film for me. I was those kids. I wanted to be those kids. I loved baseball, but I wasn't as good at it as I wanted to be. I just, everyone in it was so cool. And as I've grown older, it's one of those films that has not, like, there's never a time that I don't want to watch Bad News Bears. You put it on, I'm there. I got in trouble in Olympia by showing it outdoors at an event, and they were like, "Wait a second, there's a kid shouting ethnic slurs. You can't show this publicly." I was like, "But it was so heartwarming when I was a kid." Times are changing. So there's that, and then Star Wars, which I saw the way you saw Pulp Fiction, except not on home video. The summer it came out, I saw it every week. It was just like a ritual. I would go down to the State Theater, which became the Dollar Theater, but when it was just the State Theater, and it was the one big theater, and I saw it every weekend for 16 straight weeks, to the point where there was nobody else in the theater but me. I was just obsessed with that film and the experience of it. And I don't want to go into it too much because Star Wars is obvious, but it also was. It was one of those cases. It does inform this, because when I was so into Star Wars, the people I knew weren't, and it got me sort of picked on at school. And I think that kind of experience with the Bad News Bears informs someone who would come up with a podcast like The World Is Wrong, like, you know. And then the third one, and I don't believe that I actually saw it then, but I was aware of it then. And when I really want to feel nostalgic for that time, I don't watch the Bad News Bears and I don't watch Star Wars, but I watch All the President's Men. That's my, like, in a weird way, All the President's Men is like comfort food for me as a movie. And that's really weird, but that'll also make sense as we go forward in exploring my filmography. I think it just links into the history of that time, and that my life and the world that my parents were in felt more like the paranoia and the politics of All the President's Men than Star Wars or Bad News Bears. Those are both escapes from that world.
Yeah.
So that's sorry, but that's my number one.
Oh, what cheater!
I'm telling you, I'm breaking the rules on these things. Because that's like, it's just like, that tells you, that's me as a kid. And then there's my awakening into what I would say adult cinema, which is things that end in a way that like you wouldn't show a kid. And maybe I'm a little too young to see them, but they wrecked me. There was a mini series of called King with Paul Winfield as Martin Luther King. I'll pair them easier, so I'm not going to put them back. I won't list them out like I was because that's unfair. You're right. So King with Paul Winfield and Little Big Man, both of which have these shocking, murderous endings that if you don't know that there's a Native American genocide and you don't know that Martin Luther King gets assassinated, but you know these are kind of true stories, so the part of you that's like looking for the truth when you're a kid is in it and you're following along and you're just used to the heroes not getting killed at the end of movies. Both of those films were so shocking. I mean, particularly the King was so shocking. Like I stayed home from school. I had such a crying like jag of like, I lost my shit that when he got killed and that I still remember it as like the first truly traumatizing moment I experienced in cinema. And weirdly, it's so, and maybe this is something we can get into, that even though that was really painful, there was also this deep erotic charge in my body, not like sexual, but erotic. Like I was viscerally moved by it. And of course I've sought out that experience in future films. Mm-hmm. And so like other films that, so that jumps us forward to my teenage years when I discovered I was moved to Massachusetts. I got to start going to second run theaters. The first place I was at with that, not even second run, like classic movie houses at the Harvard Square Theater and the Brattle Theater, and where that was the first place where they were re-releasing all the Hitchcock films like Rope and Rear Window, and I saw all those things. But the two that just killed me were Rebel Without a Cause and The Graduate. And those were I walked out of those. It felt like within a month I saw those two films and I was like, I'm going to be an actor. There's no, like, that's what I want to be. Both those guys. And I want to throw into the mix, at the time, Family Ties had just hit, and Michael J. Fox and what he was doing as an actor at that time also figures into the mix. But I don't think that's
interesting.
Just there was a realness to all three of them that spoke to me, and I was just like, I relate to something in the humanity. But particularly, I've never gone back to watch Family Ties, and even when I've seen little things, I'm like, that's TV. It was really not very good. Still like Michael J. Fox a lot, but Rebel Without a Cause and The Graduate are foundational to me. Like those are movies that I would like to be in or make, or that's me. And then finally, and this is getting me out to Hollywood, when I was in high school, I interviewed the guy who wrote the movie The Sure Thing. And when I moved, and he gave me a card that said, if you ever need a place to crash in LA, give me a shout. And I had moved out to LA with some friends, and we all got kicked out of the place because there's like 8 of us living in this 1-bedroom apartment. And I called this guy's number. His name was Jonathan Roberts. And he was like, this is great. I'm just going out of town. You can stay at my place for a week. And I ended up staying there for like, I don't know, at least 3 months, just rent free. He was just, and he basically gave me an education in film. He would like show films. So he was like kind of, you know how you'd be if there was some kid who was really into film, was sleeping on your couch. You haven't seen this? You should watch this thing. You should watch this thing. And the one that really got me was Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. I'd never seen it before. And so to me, The Sure Thing and the Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, that gets me to Hollywood. And those really inform my aesthetic in some ways that are really, like, both of those. Like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is everything that I aspire to in film. I think it is the greatest accidental masterpiece in history. And if it's intentional and it appears as being an accidental masterpiece, that makes it even better. Like, you just cannot take anything away from that film. I love it. Full stop. That's who I am, from the Bad News Bears to the Valley of the Dolls. And that's my
two movies
list.
on that list I have not seen. I have not seen King. Is that something I could watch? Has that been released on DVD?
You know, I haven't watched it since I was a kid. It was really thinking about this that made me, I was like, what are the peak cinematic experiences that rocked my world? And you couldn't rock my world any more than that film did. I have to seek it out. Yeah. I just found it on IMDb.
And I've never seen All the President's Men. I've never seen that movie.
Oh, my God. It is.
I know. Several people have told me, like, that's my favorite movie. Like, I worked at the Austin Film Society, and the manager at the theater there, that was his favorite movie, and he couldn't believe that I've never seen it.
It is a gorgeous, amazing film. Damn. Yeah. Good. Well, lucky you.
It's a blind spot. It's a blind spot.
Okay, so that's our 5. That's our influences.
I like it. This is good.
So, and we have very different lists, but there's complementary stuff. I should say that I do have we're going to talk about 10 another time. We're not going to go into all these films. Okay, so let's. So why don't since you went first on the influences, I'm going to go first on these are the great ones. Like, to me, these are the ones who had pretty much. So I'll explain how I did my list, and then I break the rules in a nicer way with this one. So so I did it as like my 5 for the ages. These are the film artists, directors who define my cinematic vocabulary. With every one of them, I've seen everything. Everything they've done, barring some, maybe some little cracks in the firmament, but mostly I can speak with authority about all of these directors. And so that's where you should, it's not even my list of who I think is the greatest. There are people who I'm sure are way better than the people who are on my list, that just wouldn't tell you anything about me. I'd just be showing off by saying Akira Kurosawa. Like, I've seen 4 or 5 of his films, and I think he's great, obviously, but I wouldn't put him on this list because if I met someone who really knew Kurosawa, I would just be listening. I would have not much to contribute except, that one was good. Yeah, Okay, so that's all the preamble. So, wow, this is an intimate list. This one's really a little bit hard. Hold on. Okay, so my list, I'm going to go just top to bottom, because that's how I think of it.
Okay. You're not going to build up? You're not going to build it up?
No, I'm going to work down. I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So, number 1, because it's just obvious. Number 1 is Orson Welles. He's like the Beatles. Yeah. It's like obvious, but when I was learning about film, he was the guy that you had to know. And I felt, sometimes when there's someone who's so famous and they're the one that you're supposed to love, and then you find out that you don't really like them, it's such a bummer. I kind of feel that way about, there's certain directors, I guess I'll just give it away. Like, I kind of feel that way about Hitchcock and Scorsese. I love them both. As a film head, I love them, but I don't, it's not like I resonate. Like, I'd rather they were making different kinds of movies than they're making. Orson Welles makes the kind of movies that I wanted Orson Welles to make, and his life inspires me, and everything about Orson Welles just screams movies. And, I don't know what that is, but he's the archetype. Also, his independence, and I love him. I love Orson Welles. Sue me. Next up, don't sue me. Woody Allen. He's my number 2. I've seen everything he's done for years. Just knowing that I was going to get a new independent film from this writer, director, actor that I loved was phenomenal. And since he's had his troubles, my relationship to his troubles have also defined my experience of film. So he's just unavoidable. He's in my blood, and I love Woody Allen. Next, John Sayles. John Sayles.
Wow.
I've seen everything he's done. I think he's America's great political filmmaker, but I think he's also one of the most entertaining. And he bridges the gap of B films. He bridges a lot of gaps that I love. His films are full of history. They're very specific. He knows how to work with movie stars in a way that I love. And a lot of his films are not as available as they used to be when there were video stores. And I've never seen a John Sayles film that I didn't love and learn something from. And next one up, and I wonder if you'll get the theme. I realized when I got to the end of this that I was very surprised about something, but it makes sense. Next is Albert Brooks.
I'll make it up to you. I'll make you breakfast in bed for life.
No, stay away from the food. You'll lose it. I just want to know how this happened. I can't understand it. How did it happen?
I don't know. I just held things in so long, I just burst.
What did you hold in? What were you holding in?
Everything. Listen, you weren't the only one whose life wasn't satisfying. I sat in that office for 7 years without a window. Sometimes I felt like I was going crazy.
Why didn't you wake me up? Why didn't you tap me on the shoulder and say, I think I'm having this problem. Is it okay if I go down and lose everything? Then I could have helped. Maybe I could have said no. I'm sure the Desert Inn has an all-night shrink service along with a spa facility, don't they? Don't you think someone could have counseled us? He would have said, well, look, she's got to let it go somehow. Why don't you spend $10,000 and rent the Goodyear blimp and have it fly around and flash positive things? Much cheaper, same result. Why didn't you wake me up? We could have discussed this.
I didn't understand it until now.
Oh, great. Okay, well, congratulations. I'm glad. I'm glad you understand everything. Unfortunately, I'm still screwed up. And we don't have the money to fix me. You're fixed. And now we have, a couple of hundred for me. 100,000 for you, 100 for me. I think I was sicker than you to begin with. Oh, God. I guess this was my fault. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe I just didn't explain the nest egg well enough. If you had understood, it's a very sacred thing, the nest egg. And if you had understood the nest egg principle, as we will now call it, in the first of many lectures that you will have to get, because if we are to ever acquire another nest egg, we both have to understand what it means. The egg is a protector like a god, and we sit under the nest egg, and we are protected by it. Without it, no protection. Want me to go on? It pours rain. Hey, the rain drops on the egg and falls off the side. Without the egg, wet, it's over. But you didn't understand it, and that's why we're where we are.
I understood the nest egg.
Well, please do me a favor. Don't use the word. You may not use that word. It's off limits to you. Only those in this house who understand nest egg may use it, and don't use any part of it either. Don't use nest, don't use egg. If you're out in the forest, you can point. The bird lives in a round stick. And you have things over easy with toast.
Another iconoclastic indie writer-director. I think of Albert Brooks and Woody Allen as being very similar, except that
yes.
Woody Allen is way more, just has a much greater work ethic. He's
True.
I
Man,
wish.
Wouldn't it be great if Albert Brooks made a movie a year, like a gift the universe would have had?
Yeah. Yes. I would love to live in that world. But as it is, his catalog is just, I don't know. It depends. You have to be in it all the way, because a couple of them you might have to be an Albert Brooks fan to like it. But I think at a certain point in an artist's career, that's who you're making films for anyway. You're not trying to prove yourself to new people with your most recent film, 8 films into a pretty perfect run. But I think he has a just a perfect run. He has never made a film that as a director, that you don't want to watch. And then he has this whole other interesting thing as an actor and as a stand-up that are all unique in their own way. But just as a director, Albert Brooks, perfection. Wow. If he's got another film, can't wait to see it. And the 5th one, you probably know, it's Warren Beatty. And I think of him as a pure film artist. He is a producer and he's an actor, and he hires directors who are great to collaborate with. he knows where his weaknesses are, and he knows how to build a team around. Like, yeah, and all of his films, they're political, they're funny, they're love stories, and depending upon what you think about Ishtar, I feel like he's 9 out of 10. Yeah, then he's 9 out of 10 in terms of great films.
10 out of 10.
No, I mean, Love Affair is, I enjoy it because I'm a Warren Beatty fan, but
yeah,
I can't defend it as a film that deserves to be on that list. But yeah, so that's my 5. And do you know what unites them all? And I didn't realize this until I had it all together.
That they all also acted in movies.
Yeah, they're all actors.
They all write their own movies too.
Yeah, they're full. To me, they write films for themselves to star in or be in, and like they build the whole ritual around something about them that makes their films so personal and feel personal.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, and I think that they're all political in some way. They're all white guys, mostly Jewish. So it reflects me and who I am.
Yeah, that you're going back to your top 5. I've seen pretty much the only blind spot for me really is John Sayles. Like I've seen every Orson Welles movie, seen every Warren Beatty movie but one. I've seen every Woody Allen movie for the most part, every Albert Brooks movie. But Sayles, I've only seen like maybe 3 of them. So it's definitely one I need to like. What's great, going back to Vulcan Video, he would come in there occasionally because his son, I think, worked at the restaurant next door. And so he would, whenever he was in town, he would come by Vulcan and would just hang out and just talk to the clerks about movies. And he was the nicest of men, like the greatest guy, and very handsome too. If you've seen him in person, he's a handsome, for a writer, director, handsome guy. And like the few that I've seen were great. Like I've seen Lone Star, I've seen Secret of Roan Inish. I think that's it.
Oh, you are in for you're in for a treat,
man. Great.
He is, because they're all really smart. They're really funny. A lot of them, they're political in a way that feels really natural to the film. Like that drives. It's not like people spouting off. It's a demonstration of dynamics in this way that I feel like. Anyway, so I'm excited for you to get to know John Sayles, and I'm excited to talk with you about the other 4 directors. And I'm also really happy that you put. Like I knew you were going to put Warren Beatty on there, but I'm very happy that you did because I knew you liked him in general, actor, director, all that. But like I feel even still, he doesn't quite get his due as a filmmaker, which doesn't make sense. Because he is one of the best filmmakers. And that's not even just counting that he helped kind of start New Hollywood by getting Bonnie and Clyde together, even though he didn't direct that. But, like, that's basically a Warren Beatty movie, But, like, his movies are so unique and so good. And, like, they're, like, not just, like, Dick Tracy, which is just fun and the best, but, like, Reds is so good and important. And Bulworth is even more... Bulworth's even more important now. Like, watching the movie now feels like it's about what we're going through now. Yep.
And it's just, like, it's so... He's so talented. And I think because he was so famous first as an actor, and because he only has directed a small handful of things, people kind of don't think of him as a filmmaker. I don't know why. But he is he should be on those lists when you see the 50 greatest directors, blah, blah, blah. Warren Beatty's never on those lists, but he should be near the top of those lists, in my opinion.
You got no argument for me. I tell you, I want to do a whole series on Warren Beatty. That's how important I think he is, and how the fact that no one's done this is crazy. Yeah. And whenever you read the biographies about it's really, honestly, it is a lesson in what actresses go through, the way people write about Warren Beatty. His amazing story as an artist gets overwhelmed by the nerdy writer's obsession with his sex life. And it drives me, of course he leans into it with his film. And we'll talk about that. I think a lot of times these great directors will lean into their controversies in their work in a way that totally muddies the water in a way that like, well, what artists will do. It's like, this is what's going on in my life, so I'll make it into a movie. But now people think it's really my life, but I'm just making fun of what you thought was in my life, and now it really is my life. You know, and I think that's also part of why I love. You could see that's sort of true of all of these directors. There's a way that the spell, the magic of making movies, when you put yourself in them, your blood's in the game in a whole different way than when you get to sit back and move people around in your shot. And I think that's also, they approach it like singer-songwriters. I'm also a musician, and I think that's part of it, is that they are building this opera around themselves, and it works on them in ways that we get to see as an audience. Like Orson Welles did some bad magic on himself, and we got to watch it for a century, you know.
Yeah.
Half a century. Okay, so that's my thank you for listening. I love sharing it with you. I can't wait to hear your list.
All right, here's my list. So I'm going to start with the one that you don't care about, Martin Scorsese.
I do care about him a lot. I do care about. You can't. Not, he's the greatest guy to listen to talk about film.
Yeah, and I think so. Like he hearing him talk about movies, his care about movies, what he's done for film preservation. I didn't put it on my influential list because he's one of the directors. But when I first saw After Hours, when I was 13. So when I was 13, I was at a kid's house for a slumber party. Everyone had fallen asleep, and his parents had a great video collection, and they had After Hours, and all I saw was the Cheech and Chong were in it. I was like, I want to watch a Cheech and Chong movie. And so I put that movie in. I was all by myself. It was like 3 a.m, and my mind was blown because this is the first Scorsese movie I ever saw, and I never saw a movie where the camera did like the camera movement and the way the camera moved and the mood of that and the little cinematic references. Like that movie's full of references like Truffaut stuff and all these things. I mean, I didn't know that at the time, but like I just saw that movie and be like, oh, this is like, that's when I learned what a director did, was watching After Hours. And then of course I was like, well, I got to see more of this guy's stuff like immediately. So I think I went to the library the next week and took home Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, and Goodfellas. And then I was like, oh my, what the fuck is this? This is the best stuff ever. And I still feel that way. And everybody on my list here, I like everything. Like everything is a 4-star movie. It's like how I am with bands. Like if I like this band a lot, I'm going to even like the stuff that everyone hates because there's something really fascinating there. So like I go to bat for every Scorsese movie. For sure. And I just, he can read the phone book and I would fall in love.
And I want to just be clear. I want to make sure I'm really clear on this. I am not at all, like, that's what I'm saying. If I was making a list of the greatest directors, Scorsese would be at the top of this list. One of these tops of these lists. I don't, like, I'd rather hang out with Warren in Warren Beatty's world or Woody Allen's world than Martin Scorsese's world. But that doesn't mean that, like, I don't want to start this because this is foundational. I want to make it super clear that the only reason I'll ever use, I will sometimes use him rhetorically as to say, like, I would rather talk to ... than Martin Scorsese about anything, not because it's out of a respect. It's like, that's how much I love this other person. Like the person I would most like to speak with about film, if I got to speak with Bryan Connolly I would rather talk with Bryan Connolly about film than Martin Scorsese. Is not a diss on Martin Scorsese. It's a compliment to him that I use him as the example of someone who's so smart about film. Okay. Just because I did say something disrespectful, or maybe it's seemingly disrespectful, and I wanted to clarify.
I'm just picking on you. But, I mean, also with Scorsese growing up as an Italian-American, or Sicilian-American, as my grandmother would correct me, in America, his movies were very important, seeing those types of people in movies. And like, when I watched Goodfellas, my grandmother was around, my Sicilian grandmother, and she walked in the room. I don't remember what part, and she was in the doorway, and she got real quiet, and she just said, this movie makes me feel very wistful, which I don't think anyone a grandmother saying about Goodfellas, interesting. But anyways, next on my list is David Lynch.
Oh, yeah.
Which pains me to say in a way, because to me that's like the most obvious, like anybody who's gone to college who likes movies loves the shit out of David Lynch. You know, just almost as like Yeah, of course. But like, there's something like the way like that was sort of my introduction to what abstract filmmaking could be. Even though he was, and what's great is he was able to get away with it on a commercial level, which is like nearly impossible. But like when you watch any of the 3 seasons of Twin Peaks, it's amazing that that's on like real television. Like that's a thing. Like the first Twin Peaks was on in 1989, and the fact that that was on like ABC is insane. And the fact that he's always been able to push his sort of like painter artist way of making a movie, and I find that endlessly inspiring. And the fact that he doesn't even really talk about, like, he's kind of the opposite of Scorsese. He never really talks about movies. I don't even really know what movies he likes, but he just like is a true artist using film and video as for his art. And I'm always amazed by everything that guy does. And it's just like, he is the best. And he's hilarious too. And I was obsessed with trying to have hair like him when I was 18. So that's the second one. The third one for me would be John Cassavetes. I got into him in college, and that was like another thing of like, oh, I didn't know movies could be this. Like, this is amazing. Like, I've never seen movies so human before, and so much about people and real feeling people. And his movies are very difficult, and they're definitely not for everybody. But there's just, and then he has that, to me, he taps in the same thing that Orson Welles with. It's like, you have the independent spirit, and you just do it because you have to, and you can, and you'll do whatever it takes to get your damn movie made, like you're going to, like, whatever, and he just is a constant inspiration. And like, it also just leads into that I love the heck out of Ben Gazzara and Peter Falk, seeing them in anything, and Seymour Cassel is just, and Jenna Rollins is just like, oh, they're like the best actors with this great director. And it's just like what he gives actors in his movies, like, it's amazing, I think. And then Werner Herzog is my fourth, another one that I would pay to have read the phone book. But he has such a adventurous spirit and such a mischievous way of being a filmmaker. And like, I like everything he does, and he just like, he doesn't give a shit. Like, he'll just do whatever he wants, like from Aguirre, the Wrath of God, to Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans. Is like, you're just making the movies you want to make, and if people like it, great. If not, you don't care. Like, you're just making it you're making movies your own way, and you are just somehow making movies in a bubble where you don't seem like you're influenced by anything else that any other people are making. You're just doing your own whatever you're doing, and just his sort of like, you must steal the camera, make a movie, whatever it takes, if that's within you. Like, I find that very inspiring. And then the last for me is Fassbinder. I'm obsessed with Fassbinder. I've seen all of his movies, which is a lot. He made a lot of movies in a short amount of time and died young, which is too bad, because who knew what he could have made now. But him, I think the first time I ever saw a movie with men having sex with men was in a Fassbinder movie, and I was like, I've never seen that before. I was in Corwell, and I love Corwell. Corwell is great, and he is just so good, and his movies are also really tough, but he's very political. He's probably the most political of anyone on this list, and he just gets really, the way he's angry in his movies is delightful to me. And yeah, I just really, he's another one who just did whatever he wanted. He made 6-7 movies a year, didn't care. Like, that's all he just lived and wanted to make movies until he died making movies. Like, that's all he did. The end. So that's my 5.
I'm surprised that Kaurismäki didn't make your list.
He's a runner-up, and I'm a big fan. But
I want to hear your honorable mentions, because I love your list, but I feel like if Kaurismäki, who's one of the directors you turned me on to, is on your honorable mentions, I want to know who didn't make your list.
Yes, I have it, because I really tried to do 5, and I just walked away because I knew I would just change it forever. So I picked 5 and walked away.
I already want to change my list.
But for my honorable mentions, like, these are the people that I have like director sections for in my house, like on my video wall. Robert Altman, Paul Thomas Anderson, Michael Bay, Leos Carax, John Carpenter, the Coen brothers, David Cronenberg, Claire Denis, Robert Downey Sr., Blake Edwards, Michael Mann, Terry Gilliam, Stanley Kubrick, Tarkovsky, John Landis,
Nice.
Russ Meyer, Andy Sedaris, Sam Raimi, Kaurismäki, Jim Jarmusch, and Kurosawa. And and Steven Soderbergh.
Oh yeah. See, those are. It's important because I agree. Like, I hope that what it is like. I have not heard anything. Maybe you can. If you can echo this with me, then this will help the listeners. I don't hear anything on your list that I wouldn't be honored to have on my list. And going back to your top, and most of what is on your list is stuff that I could speak intelligently about. With a few exceptions, we'll get into blind spots, and that includes I love what I've seen of Herzog, but I wouldn't consider myself someone who could speak that intelligently about his whole filmography, so I'm interested in learning that. And Fassbinder, as a blind spot, but Scorsese, when you were talking, it made me think, if this goes well and we do this, I'd almost love to at some point record some bonus episodes where we just talk about doing one episode on Cassavetes. Because the world isn't wrong about Cassavetes. The world knows Cassavetes. We'll never cover Cassavetes on this podcast from the standpoint of the world is wrong about him. But I would just love to do an episode where we got to just go through and talk about why he means so much to us. Because he's one. Lynch. I could cinematic experiences that blew me away. I want to. Who didn't make either of our lists, and I think it's an indictment of us because we both love his films, is Steven Spielberg.
To me, that's like saying you like water.
I know, but so is Kubrick.
You gotta drink water.
So is Kubrick. I mean, I think the fact that he's absent from both of our lists makes me want to put him on my list.
But we haven't done our third list yet.
Oh, our favorites.
So
Okay.
We haven't done our favorites yet.
Okay.
So
okay.
you're jumping the gun.
So, and now we're on to the favorites list, and I want to say this is the one that I totally disrespected the five. You just can't, and I don't expect. I have so many provisos in mine. So why don't you go? I went first on the last one. It's your turn to go first. So, but what I'm saying is, go hog wild. Feel free to not limit yourself, because the point here is to get to know you, not to for you to pass the test of the right five. I just want to know what you love.
I have 5, and then I have 5 honorable mentions. So this is what I got. So I thought of this as these are what people refer to as their desert island movies, or if I was forced to get rid of everything I owned and I can only take this, if the house is burning and this is all I had, if the world was ending, I was like, you can have these 5 movies, or it's 5 types of movies, and this is it. I definitely cheated and fudged it on. This is the one where I cheated, because I have 1,000 movies on this list, but I stayed 10.
And you went with movies. You went with movies.
Right? Was I supposed to put TV?
I went with directors and artists who I follow. So.
I did a few directors, a few actors, and some movies. I did a mix.
Okay, great.
But they're all movie makers. So and one TV person actually. So I don't even know where to begin. So I guess I'll begin in the obvious. So I put Raiders of the Lost Ark on there. That movie is maybe the best movie ever made. I can watch that movie every day, and we'll always get excited, and we'll always love it. And talking about Spielberg, it's just I would not be into movies, period, if it weren't for Steven Spielberg, truly. And it's the first movie book I ever got myself was The Complete Films of Steven Spielberg. And I went through that book, and I started at the beginning, and I went, and every movie I could find, I was able to find all of them but one, which was I could not find Sugarland Express in Olympia. But I went through everything else, from Duel all the way up to, I think when the book came out, it was Jurassic Park. So I went through all of that, and it was just the best. It was just that is a good film school. That is some good film language. That's how you compose shots. That's how you that's how you edit a movie. It's how you get a movie well acted. You can make a heartwarming movie. You can make a tragic historical movie. You can make a thought-provoking thing. You can make the most fun thing. Like, he is the best. He still is. Like, maybe we'll do an episode about Ready Player One, because I love that movie.
Oh, we'd love to. That's exactly what we should do. I need to, because I've been turned off by what people have said about it. I haven't seen it, so that's great.
Oh, that movie's so good.
Oh,
and,
thank you.
And I love Catch Me If You Can. It's so good. Catch Me If You Can is an amazing movie, and he is just like it's like I said, it's like water. It's just like you don't think about it, because growing up in the 70s and 80s, like it's just there. It's just a part of, if you're not even into movies, you know who he is. Most people can probably list 5 of his movies, and it's just like, he's the best. But Raiders for me is like the best of the best. It's so, I just watched it again the other day. I watched the movie so much as a kid, I actually broke the tape, it's the only time it's ever happened. And my dad had to go in and like scotch tape it together, because we had to have that movie. So that's the first one. The second one for me is Caddyshack. That is the best comedy ever made by anybody. I love that movie so much. It's like the funniest thing. It never ceases to make me like literally fall on the floor and laugh. Like Rodney Dangerfield in that is on like a Groucho Marx level of like just the nonstop funny. I've been told I dance like the gopher in that movie. I guess that's my go-to dance move, is the gopher dance in Caddyshack. That movie is like this, like, and the fact that it's just like, it dares to even be kind of plotless. Like, it doesn't care. It's like, we're so funny, we don't even really need a plot. Like,
there was a plot, and they threw it away.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, there's kind of a plot with like Miles O'Keefe, and nobody cares. Like, it's just like, you just go and go. Is that the guy's name, Miles O'Keefe? Is that right?
I think that's right.
I
Yeah.
don't remember. The not funny guy in the movie, but like that movie's just
O'Keefe,
like
Michael O'Keefe.
Michael O'Keefe, and that movie feels like it's definitely fueled 100% by cocaine, but it doesn't matter. Like, it's just like, I'm sure that they had to cut like hours out of that movie to make it a feature length thing. I just talked about it now. I want to like hang up and watch it right now.
I'll join you.
Third for me is, I love the James Bond movies. I have since I was a kid. I'm obsessed with them. Like, the first movie trivia I ever got into was I read the James Bond encyclopedia and just memorized a lot of it. In my like way I would impress friends is I memorized all of them in chronological order and would list all the James Bond movies in chronological order and try to impress. Nobody was impressed, but I was impressed.
Did anyone?
I knew.
I would be the kid singing along with you. You'd be like, Dr. No, Goldfinger.
But the new one
was it Dr. No, Goldfinger, Russia with Love? Thunderball?
It was Dr. No. It was Dr. No from Russia with Love, then Goldfinger,
then Thunderball. Okay, see, we would have been friends in high school. Okay.
But I'm obsessed with it, even as an adult. Like, I've seen those movies more than most. I recently went through all of them and drank every drink he had on screen. So every drink that Bond has, I drank along with each movie. The one that gets you the most drunk are the Sean Connery ones, for sure, and Casino Royale. They have the most drinks in it. But damn, I love those Bond movies. 4, I'm obsessed, and my favorite actor of all time is Nicolas Cage.
Young man, I would like to know the name of your superior.
Right now, I'm working on about an hour and a half sleep over the past 3 days. And I'm still trying to remain courteous. I'm beginning to think that that's getting in the way of my being effective.
What are you doing? What?
Stop it.
What are you doing?
I want to know where Daryl is.
Oh, my God.
Nobody saw me come in. Nobody knows I'm here. This old woman's gonna run out of air, and you're gonna have a tough time convincing people that it wasn't you who did it to her. And even if you do convince them that you didn't kill her on purpose, you're still gonna have a tough time selling them that you took care of her with a fuck.
God.
Now listen to me. Where the fuck is he? I said, where the fuck is he?
He's on an airplane. Miss Antoinette bought him a ticket and sent him to live with her family in England.
It's okay. That's okay. That's a good girl. Suck it up. Come, there you go. There you go. That's it. Take it in. That's a good girl. Take it in. Good. 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 That's it. Breathe. Maybe you should drop dead, you selfish cunt. You ever think about your kids? Or your grandkids? Huh? Sucking up their inheritance through that fucked oxygen tube? And Benny's fucked intensive care? You fucks, I hate you. I hate you both. I should fucking both. Just right now, I should fucking kill you fucking both! You're the fucking reason this country's going down the drain.
I was deep into him before he became a meme, before this whole everybody liking him ironically, before they liked him again really.
Yeah.
Like I was obsessed with Raising Arizona when I was 8 years old. Because we had free HBO when I was 8 one summer, and they played that movie constantly. And that movie blew my mind, and especially his performance. And then when the cable was pulled, I watched the scrambled Raising Arizona multiple times because I liked it and remembered it by that point that I could just listen to it and enjoy it scrambled. But I think what he does with acting, like I feel like to me, like he is like the next step. Like after you have like you probably maybe disagree because you're an actor and I'm not. I don't know what I'm talking about. But like when you go from like your Brando and then you go into like your Dustin Hoffman, Pacino type guys, and then I think the next step for me is like you get into your Nicolas Cage is doing something different with acting that no one else is really doing. Still, like he does this weird, like the things he talks about. Where he's like, "Oh, I'm tapping into kabuki theater," and this, and it's like, "What are you doing? You're a nut." Like I'm always excited to see him do whatever crazy thing he's going to do, and I think he's also like I think a lot of people forget that he's also like a really, really good actor, not just like a big actor. Like him in Leaving Las Vegas is one of my favorite performances. It's so good, and he's great. And then fifth for me is I'm obsessed with and have always been obsessed with the films of Adam Sandler. I can't get enough of Adam Sandler. I'm a constant defender of Adam Sandler. I think that's sort of why I was excited to do this podcast because I've lived the World Is Wrong podcast by constantly my entire life defending my love of his movies forever. Like I like everything, and I like everything. Like this movie's like usually someone will be like, "Oh, but what about this one?" I'll be like, "I like that one too." Like, but and this one too, and I'm like, "Yeah, I like that one too." I once derailed a pitch meeting because they asked me what I thought was funny, and I said Adam Sandler, and the guy just like froze and his brain broke, and he pulled up on his phone this complete filmography and went through every movie and asked me if I actually liked them, and it took about an hour and killed the meeting, and we never finished the meeting. That's
why we're doing a podcast. Because that, honestly, it's true. That there is a certain level of understanding a film that comes from knowing what it is to tank a meeting because you love film so much.
So that's my top 5, but then my honorable mentions, like the other ones that like are still like I could not say. I love the movie Repo Man. I love it so much. Like that movie is so unique and so good.
So how much do I get paid? $25 a car?
Paid? You don't get paid. You kidding? You work on commission. That's better than being paid. Most cars you rip are worth $200 or $300. $50,000 Porsche might make you $5,000. Come on, dickhead. It helps if you dress like a detective, too. Detectives dress kind of square. People think this guy's a cop. They're gonna think you're packing something. They don't fuck with you so much.
Are you?
What?
Packing something.
An asshole gets killed for a car. Guys that make it are the guys that get in their cars at any time. Get in at 3 a.m., get up at 4. That's why there ain't a repo man I know that don't take speed.
Speed, huh? Jesus Christ.
I never broke into a car, never hotwired a car, kid. I never broke into a trunk. I shall not cause harm to any vehicle nor the personal contents thereof, nor through inaction let that vehicle or the personal contents thereof come to harm. It's what I call the repo code, kid. Don't forget it. Etch it in your brain. Not many people got a code to live by anymore. Hey, look at that. Look at those assholes over there. Ordinary fucking people. I hate them.
Me too.
What do you know, kid? See, an ordinary person spends his life avoiding tense situations. Repo man spends his life getting into tense situations. Assholes. Let's go get a drink.
And it's got some of the best. Robbie Mueller did the cinematography. So it's like, it looks amazing. Like, it's so, Harry Stanton is so good in it. Cy Richardson. I love Repo Man. And that was a movie my mom told me as a child as a bedtime story before I knew it was a movie. She would tell me the plot of Repo Man when I would go to bed when I was like 6. And then when I found out it was a real...
My mom did the same thing for me with Animal House.
Okay.
That's why I know that when you said that experience, I was like, wow, I thought that I'm the only person who had that happen. And you had Repo Man. That's a great, okay, good. Keep going. Sorry for interrupting, but it hit me so hard.
I love, we mentioned him before, but I love Quentin Tarantino. He is one of the, there's only 2 filmmakers that I go out of my way to see in the theater opening day always, no matter what. And he's one of them. Like, if I don't see it in the theater, I failed. So like I will see all of his movies in the theater till he stops. He is the best. I love it so much. And then the other one is Paul Thomas Anderson. I think he is the best. Anything he makes, I get so excited about. Like, I will see anything he puts out, no matter what it is, forever. And I love those guys' movies so much. This is a weird one. I will watch literally any movie from Hong Kong. I don't care what it is. There's something about the movies of Hong Kong, especially from 70s through early aughts, that I like those movies a lot. Like, there's something about that culture and the way they made comedies and action movies and dramas that just like really excites me. And I will never stop eating that up. And then the last one, which is not a movie at all, it's a TV guy, but I've always loved anything David Simon did. I was obsessed with Homicide: Life on the Street in the 90s. I recently just rewatched all of Homicide: Life on the Street, and it's like the best. And The Wire and Treme and anything that guy does is like fun, entertaining, human, socially responsible, just like the best stories. It's just like he is the best. And anything he makes, I will get deeply into. So those are the things that is like I love them so much and everything that they do. So that's my favorites list.
I love your list. There's nothing on your list that I disapprove of. Almost everything on your list is something that could be on my list, except a big blind spot around Hong Kong films. So yeah, I'm with you on Nicolas Cage. I have early memories of just being blown away by him. I won't get into it on my list, but 2 actors who I felt like I had this experience of seeing them as supporting actors in other things, and I just couldn't stop thinking about them and like, why aren't they movie stars? And one of them was Nicolas Cage, and one of them was Denzel Washington in Carbon Copy, which was a bad film. I went back and watched it, but I remember when it was a time when I was seeing everything, I saw that movie and was just like, I've been obsessed with Denzel Washington since I saw that. Like, and then he was on St. Elsewhere. I was like, why is this guy in TV? And then when he did Glory, I was like, that's fucking Denzel Washington. Anyway, so I love your list way more than mine. It's way more specific. Mine is a much more general and has way too many people on it. I had a sort of goes without saying list, which is Quentin Tarantino, the Coen brothers, P.T. Anderson, and Spike Lee. I just feel like they're cinematic masters who have they're of my generation, but they're just a must see. They're like the Kubricks of my time. The people who are on the people who are on my other list. I'm getting to experience them as it's happening, but no one's going to learn anything about me from saying that I like those films, which is probably why P.T. Anderson and Tarantino didn't make your top 5. So my top 5 is really a top 3, and then a rotating 2 that I'm like into now, and then a like a bench that comes into my top 2. So
sure.
And I made a whole other actors list. We won't get into it on this, but I'd love to do another episode. We can just keep introducing ourselves to each other with these lists. So my top 3, Charlie Kaufman. I just think he is the cinematic genius for me, of my time. And I like that he's kind of a hidden cinematic genius, because a lot of his films are like, unless you're really following the credits, you might not know that, you might not be able to piece together his filmography, because just the films that he's directed or just the films that he's written, but all of them, he is a writer who somehow is able to exert his stamp on films that he's not directing. So you can just feel him through it in such a unique way. And he's one of those, maybe he is like, as a writer, maybe he's like what Kubrick is as a photographer, filmmaker, in that you just know that you're dealing with someone who you're going to learn from. Like, he's just come into it with so much game, and then he got the capability to keep doing that. So he's never had to stop being himself. Yeah. And standout would be, I think the masterpiece, easy entry, is Adaptation. I think that's the most Kaufman film, but I love all of his films. I love everything. The ones he's directed, and he has a new one coming. I get excited for any Kaufman film. Someone who I wish I could get excited for every film, because he doesn't make films anymore, and if he did, he'd probably be in that other list. Well, I don't know, but Tim Robbins, I think his 3 films are perfect, and I didn't really even like him as an actor until I got to know him as a director, and now I really enjoy him as an actor. But he was one of those people I was never, like, when he was in The Player, I was like, what? Why do all these people love this guy? And then as I got to know him and who he is as a person and what he did for theater in Los Angeles and all of the careers he helped, and like, he is a heroic filmmaker to me. Every one of his films is heroic. Like, I watch them and feel like, wow, Bob Roberts is a heroic film. Dead Man Walking is a heroic film. And why am I forgetting the McCarthy one? The
Cradle Will Rock.
Cradle Will Rock is a heroic film about a heroic production. So in a way, I can see why he might not be excited to make another film, because it'd be hard to top those 3. But if all he ever made was those 3 films, I feel like he's one of the greatest American filmmakers. Like, yeah. A guy who was on the other side of it, super prolific. And again, I'll see anything that I see his name on, is David Mamet. Yeah. All of his films that he directed, I think are just, and I got to grow up with him. I saw American Buffalo on Broadway when I was a kid, with Pacino, and I saw Glengarry Glen Ross on their Broadway tour with Peter Falk in the Jack Lemmon role and Joe Mantegna in the Pacino role. Wow. I didn't know it, but I loved film. Like, before I knew who he was, I loved films like The Verdict, and I loved films like The Untouchables. And then when he started making movies, everyone was just so good. And I just love, I love David Mamet. And I wish he would make more movies, because the last few that he made were fantastic, and we'll probably be talking about some of them on this podcast.
For sure.
So those are my 3 who are like, they're my favorite, and I'll just check them out no matter what they do. And they're still, well, Kaufman and Mamet are somewhat still current. Robbins, I wish he was. The next 2 are super current and are on this list this year, but might not be on this list all the time. They definitely will be. You'll see who they are. The first one is Lynn Shelton, who's from Seattle, and she just died. So I've been thinking about her a lot. But I kind of knew her. Because we were in the same scene a little bit, and I would write to her on Facebook, and when I'd see an episode of something she directed, or I was a fan, and and enough of a small scene, so we were kind of friends. And she was someone who I just dreamed of working with. I think that she is everything I've seen that she directed was phenomenal. And as far as sort of like what I was saying about Orson Welles, like finding the way in, like there are all these great female directors like Catherine Bigelow, but she's so like, I think she's great, but she goes into that Scorsese world of like, you're making films about things I don't really care about, or I don't like, that's not where I want to live, but you're great, but I don't have an entryway in. And with Lynn Shelton, I felt like from the second I saw her first film, I was in. It's just like her aesthetic, the way she deals with actors, and it just kills me. I feel like that I will never get a chance to work with her so it's almost like she's now in this sort of James Dean place where I just loved her when she was going, and now that feeling that you have with an artist who gets cut short, I'm having all of those feelings while watching her film. So it's very personal. And right now I'm actually doling them out slowly because I don't want to run out. But her most recent film, Sort of Trust with Mark Maron, I think that's a really great entryway. And I think with her, she's a great one to work backwards. And she's also done some amazing stuff on TV. And she had that quality when there was an episode of a TV series that she directed. It had something extra, and if you followed it, you could just feel it. And what it was a feeling of intimacy, maybe that like people would associate with like someone like Hal Ashby, just a really, really deeply, deeply sensitive filmmaker. On the totally other side, someone who I'm just really excited about now that he has become a director, is Shane Black. I feel like he does everything that I want from a Tarantino movie, except that he doesn't have the ability to do all the stuff that Tarantino does. So he has to work a lot harder making real Pulp Fiction-y kind of films. But I get everything that I want from a Tarantino film out of a Shane Black film at, it feels like, half the mental price, because I don't have to deal with everyone arguing about his films usually come out and nobody cares. And so there's not a big debate about it. Whereas every time a Tarantino film comes out, you sort of have to somehow deal with the cultural there's always going to be people who hate it and people who love it. Yeah. And just these annoying arguments that just are noise around my enjoyment of the films. So then then I have a list that could jump into this list, so let me just jump through them really quick. It's kind of weird. I'll watch anything that's based on an Elmore Leonard book. Anything that has Elmore Leonard involved, even tangentially, I'm in. Weirdly, I feel the same way about John Grisham. I don't think he writes good books, but I think his movies, his books are so small that when they make a movie about him, they get bigger. And that's like something that it sounds like damning with faint praise, but to do that consistently, again, I don't care if it's a guilty pleasure. If it's a Grisham thing, I'll watch it because it's going to be pulpy and it's going to be fast and it's going to have movie stars and it's going to, make me think or feel something. I love any Grisham. Vincent Gallo hasn't made many films, but everything he's made, I'm blown away by. Is another one who could be on my top list if he made more films. I think we disagree on this one, but Hal Hartley was really huge for me. I just loved his tone.
Hal.
Oh, okay, cool. I think you're maybe just making jokes about him once, but I love Hal Hartley. I loved his stuff. I love Charlie Booker, the guy who does Black Mirror, and I just think he's really, really interesting as an artist. I don't think he's easily definable, but if his name's on something, I'm in. I want to know what he's thinking and what he's saying. Getting into smaller, Keith Gordon, he's someone who I kind of know from Hollywood, and everything he does is so good and so smart. And when he talks about films, he's so good and so smart. In the same league, I put Miranda July, also from the Northwest, because I have a kinship with her, just in that sense of feeling like hometown girl. and she's so unique, and I absolutely adore her. Steve Shainberg, who directed a film that I was in when he was a director at AFI called The Prom, with Jennifer Jason Leigh and J.T. Walsh and a bunch of other great people. But he also directed Secretary and Fur, an imaginary biography, an imaginary memoir of Deanne Arbus. And I think those two, and I wish he would got to make more films, because I'll see anything he does. Ben Stiller should get a lot more respect as a director. I think he's pretty amazing. And as what shouldn't have to be an honorable mention, but Rob Reiner's first 7 is a run of perfection that dominated. That could go on my list of influences. I mean, that's why The Sure Thing is on there. When I was a young actor and a young adult as an artist, Rob Reiner was in a run of perfection. That it's so weird that he is not seen as one of the greats, because he just from Spinal Tap through A Few Good Men is just, And I won't do my whole list of actors, but I just wanted to give a shout out to, I grew up watching him, and I feel like he's maligned and loved and whatever, but I think Johnny Depp is the most interesting movie star of my generation. And I used to go up for roles with him, and I used to be jealous about him. And when I surrendered to how good he was, my life got better. So that's maybe like a lesson for this, is like, I was wrong. I was part of the world that was wrong about Johnny Depp until I gave in. And then I realized, and I feel like the same way about some of these things on my list. Like I have been the wrong one about them in the past. Yeah. So that's a long list. Do you have anything you want to say about any of them, or?
Those are all really good. It was amazing is none of us really had any crossovers so much.
Zero crossover, yeah.
Like we had crossovers in the honorable mentions, but for like our top stuff, like everything was different. So that, I like that. That means we're going to have quite the pool to pull from when we do these things, because like we are definitely each out there doing our thing. I like that.
Yeah. So
this is good.
Let's get into quickly you may have heard them from our discussions, but our cinematic blind spots. I had us like each think about like, what's an area where we just know that we're weak in the conversation. So
weak.
You went first on that one, so I'll do mine. Mine are because of the way I watch. A lot of times I'll watch films, I'll be doing something else, and my gauge of what's a good film is when I have to stop what I'm doing and be like, no, I can't watch this in the background. Because a lot of times I'm watching like TV shows or whatever. I do a lot of editing, and I like to multitask, and I just rarely start a foreign film, because I know I'm going to miss out on whatever's happening. And that's just sort of the nature of how I'm watching films now. So in the last 15, since the internet, basically, my awareness of, since I stopped watching most of my films on a screen, that's become a blind spot. And surprisingly, for those of you who are fans of my acting, horror is a big blind spot. I do not like to be scared. I do not like gore. That stuff does not make me happy. I even had to I really have to gird myself for like even a Tarantino film, but I've learned to get there, but I get scared really easily. So, we don't need to linger on the blind spots, because I don't have much to say about them.
For me, it's documentaries. I do not like them. All of them depress me. Even the ones that aren't about depressing things depress me. Like, there's something about reality that depresses me, which is probably why I escape into movies my whole life. But like seeing real people struggle or have their lives, or it's just like, it's so hard. God, it kills me. Or when it's just about someone's life, it's sad because then they usually die at the end. It's like, God, life is so hard. Like, life is hard enough. Do I need to watch a movie about it? And like, I do like some documentaries, but I will usually run away from them and avoid them at all costs.
So just to be clear, does that include like histories of film?
Yeah.
Like documentaries where Scorsese is talking about like So you don't like those? You don't like?
It's because it's like, even if I do like something like that, then I get upset that the movie's not well made or it's not cinematic enough, and I'll be like, well, this is a good subject matter, but I feel it's getting a pass for that, and no one's thinking that it's kind of a boring. The way it's made is kind of boring, like. I think it's another problem with documentaries. It's just like so many documentaries that people love or are hits are not well made, but they like the subject matter, and they kind of don't notice that it's just sort of like shot like a 60 Minutes episode or something. Like it's just like there's something that it lacks a cinematic quality that appeals to me. Usually, like there's some exceptions. Like I love the Maisels. I like D.A. Pennebaker. Like the ones that really pushed it.
Oh yeah, that was I was going to ask. Like, do you count concert films and comedy films as?
Yeah, like I can handle that, but even still, like it still makes me. There's something that makes me. It's why I can't watch. It's why I can't watch plays. I get so uncomfortable watching theater because I'm just like, this is real. Anything can happen. This is so uncomfortable. Like, what if something goes wrong? And I start to get like worried, and I can't lose myself in the same way I can with fiction. In a movie.
Wow, that's
awesome.
Awesome.
It pulls the neuroses out of me. That makes me really like I can't handle like hidden camera shows. Like I get so nervous watching like a Jackass movie. I'm just sort of like, these people are getting hurt. Something bad's gonna happen. Like I just get.
Oh yeah, that's
panic attack.
I forgot to say that's a blind spot for me. Is I have never watched a reality show. I've never. Like I've watched a show like I like there's a series called Unreal that's about the making of a reality show, and I love that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's an important distinction because I listen to a lot of podcasts where people refer to reality TV as if like oh, it's a thing like that, the first season of blah blah blah. I was like, people choosing. I have never. I do like some documentaries, but I have never. The aesthetic of them. It makes me it's just it does not draw me. So we don't talk about what we don't like, but I think it's important to be honest about our blind spots.
Exactly.
And so we're getting up towards the end of this, and there's something now basically, and of course where this is all edited, Brian, so I'm just going to talk to you and whatever. Sure. But there was a whole like thinking about this, I had this whole I got really obsessed with how to head off at the pass potentially difficult conversations about some of the artists that we're going to be covering, and I kind of bogged you down and sending you a bunch of different versions that I was working on, and then I realized just like some point last night, like I can't put myself or you or any like I can't put us through this because I'm not I can't sort of imagine for all of the future conversations that I want to head off. And I just had to just like quit. But then I had this other idea, which I think is maybe certainly a more fun conversation, because what I did was I just put on The Way We Were, because you had done this. We had talked about The Way We Were, and it's a great way to talk about your other podcast, which I have binged and I adore, the Francis Ford Coppola podcast. You're doing all of Francis Ford Coppola's films. You also did all of M. Night Shyamalan's films, and I have a long drive on Sunday, Monday, and I'm just going to binge through the M. Night Shyamalan cast.
Wow.
M. Night cast. But I went through I'm totally caught up in your dissection of the Coppola films with your partner in crime, AJ Gonzalez, I loved it. There's little areas where I have little disagreements, but mostly I'm just right on board with you until you got to The Way We Were. And I had a really profound, like when you were talking about it, I don't think of myself as a fan of The Way We Were. I saw it a long time ago, and I just think of it as like, oh, that's like a big film from the 70s, a big romantic Barbra Streisand movie. And, I remember it, but I'm not drawn to it. But when you were talking about it, I found myself getting a little bit defensive. I was like, wait, that film wasn't that bad. Like that. And so rather than talk about, because I feel like when I watched it, I was having these crazy synchronicities about like the film expressed everything that I wanted to say in whatever I was trying to work on. And I thought maybe just in talking about like even playing like the world is wrong about the way we were, using your podcast as the world. And again, with the idea that I'm totally recommending this podcast to everyone. But I feel like there's something I'd like to get off my chest about my love of the way we were when I watched it last night, that I think might, like I said, cover all the bases and also be a fun conversation to listen to, because we're talking about a movie. Okay. So I'm going to start by saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the things that you said about the way we were that I found myself reacting to and made me go and watch it. Was your basic, so you covered in, because Coppola wrote some of the screenplay for that and some of the screenplay for The Great Gatsby around the time that he was making and coming out with The Godfather, which is just super exciting, because that is a run of creativity for a filmmaker, from, The Godfather through those two films, through The Conversation and Godfather 2, that is just, as packed so much into such a small period. And I'm so looking forward to the next two episodes. And you devoted one episode to those two. And the way that the synopsis of The Way We Were was there, it's about an obnoxious woman and a not very interesting guy who's, the only interesting thing about him is that he's good looking. And it was confusing in its plot, in the time shifts. And then they ended up in LA, in Hollywood, and it didn't make sense why they were there. And it mostly, what was interesting about it was its influence on Sex and the City. Did I miss anything?
That's like the Cliff Notes version of it. There's more. There's more to it than that.
Yeah, well, you did. There's one other part, and that in the course of this movie, there's a sexual assault of Barbara Streisand on Robert Redford, is how it was described. What seemed like kind of a that's how it was described. So for those of you who love this film, you might understand how someone who's listening to it might be like, what? That can't be, that's not the same movie that I remember. So I had to get it and watch it. And oh my God, I'm so glad I did. I absolutely love this film. And I think it's illustrative of what I love about film and what I bring to this podcast. And I think is, first of all, the general agreement and appreciation, but there's like one place where there's I feel like there's a blind spot that I wanted to jump in, because I felt I so relate to the Streisand character. So she's this working class woman going to college at a time when that was a really difficult thing. She's Jewish, she's a communist, and she is sort of the person who takes is willing to take a big political stand, and that makes her she's saying she's someone who's saying the world is wrong about stuff, and that makes her the butt of jokes and something. But Robert Redford, as this guy who is, there's not nothing going on. He's basically supposed to be like J.D. Salinger. He is a supremely talented writer, and the film does a great job of telling us that without telling us that through Streisand's performance, which to me is just she is my heart is with her so much throughout this. And it ends up being the story about anti-Semitism, and that, without ever saying it, she never fits into his crowd. Even as they get together, she never fits in, and she's always asking, what is it? I know you love me, but there's something about me that's too much. There's something about, and that's such so deep in the Jewish experience. And I just saw my mother in it. I saw, she was a Jewish woman who, my dad had the same kind of attraction to her that I think Robert Redford had to Streisand in the movie. And you have to understand, this is a major move, two major movie stars making a movie about the blacklist. And that's the other thing that is from the very first line in the script, there she's the guy comes back from the War Department because they're doing the FDR, they're doing the works, what The Cradle Will Rock is about. They were doing radio plays in that world, and he comes back and they say, oh, the War Department, all they see is red, and they were talking about budgets. But immediately, and if Coppola wrote this, and this is one of the things that made me think about Coppola too, is like what he brings to so much of his films is this sense of history. And the more you know, it's like with Tarantino and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the more you know about the history of that film, the less boring it gets. If you go into that film without an awareness of that history, it can be a long and boring film. And that's some people's complaint about it. But if you know what he's doing, it's shot through with electricity. And that's what I felt in The Way We Were. I'm obsessed. My family dealt with the McCarthy hearings. So to me, that story is the story of Jews and McCarthyism and Hollywood and the difficulties of mixed marriages at a time when Jews and non-Jews getting married was still such a stigma that at the end of the movie, Robert Redford, the cad that he is, leaves, spoiler alert, leaves Barbra Streisand right after she has his baby, and he can never visit her. Why? Because she's Jewish and he's a sellout. And he's amazing. His performance of selling out to the studios, he's doing some things, and that's the other piece. I think you sort of said that Sidney Pollack wasn't really being a great director in that, but as a fan of acting, when you watch what he gets out of those two actors, you see why Robert Redford wanted to work with him again and again, because, wow, there's some... Robert Redford, I think, justifiably so. You say that he's kind of an internal actor and he doesn't bring a lot, but Sidney Pollack got a lot out of that internal stuff. And if you watch for his performance, he is like, they're both giving huge, great movie star performances at a time when they're huge, great movie stars. And it's a love story, and it's maybe I'm, that's more in my Warren Beatty kind of wheelhouse. Like a political love story is why I love Warren Beatty, because that's what he does. Epic political love stories. And so and then, because we were joking when we were talking about this, that in a way, and I'm not saying that you are a sellout, but there's a way that I approach things very much from that Barbra Streisand, like, I'm going to go to Washington and fight this blacklist. I don't care if it fucks with your career. I don't care if it fucks my life. I cannot not do this. And Robert Redford is this guy who's like, I love her, but why can't she just be like calm at a party and laugh and have a good time? And I relate to both sides of that. Anyway, my point, and I guess I'm going to give you a second to rebut or respond, but I just wanted to get that out there, because I think because like I said, I agree with everything you said in your podcast, except the review of The Way We Were. And because of the synchronicity of us doing this, I feel like it's an opportunity to like play this out of like, okay, I get that you guys didn't like it, but try and get how I got it. And while I was watching it, and I just want to say one other thing about the idea that she sexually assaulted him. He's drunk. They both get kicked out of the car. They come to her place. He takes off his clothes, gets into her bed. She's poor. She doesn't have a guest room. She gets into her bed naked. And then she has to, in what I think is just a beautiful scene as an actress. Oh my God, that scene is amazing. Of her deciding, what am I going to do? Like, she takes her beats, and it's so, you're right with her. She doesn't say a word. And am I going to take off my clothes? What am I going to do? I'm so excited to see this guy, but I don't know what to do. And then she does. And I don't go into the whole scene, but it's just the acting that Streisand's doing is so beautiful and raw. And the fact that it was characterized as a sexual assault, I take offense. I take offense. I will not let her be canceled for what she did to Robert Redford in that bed, because I'm not saying he did. He rolled over on top of her. Anyway, that's my defense of The Way We Were. And that will tell you something about how I'm going to approach this podcast.
Well, everybody has different opinions on everything, because everybody brings their own life to it. So the people that hate the movies that we're going to talk about, they're not wrong either. They can hate that movie. That, to them, that is a terrible movie. Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of people who hate Pet Sounds, and there's other people who think Pet Sounds is the best. Like, it's all about like, cause me, I was not raised Jewish. I do not know a lot about that experience at all. Like, I know very little about what happened with the blacklist, or I don't even really know what communism is so much, because unfortunately I was raised in the American school system. So I don't have a lot of knowledge about this history, and so I don't have that to bring to it. Like, it's almost like, I mean, it's not like it, but like when I hate, we're not supposed to say what we hate, but for this episode I will. I do not like those Marvel movies because I don't read comics. I don't know anything about it. But I feel like the people who like those comics get more out of whoever those people are when they watch it. And I watch it, I'm just like, what is this noise? I don't get it. And I think like everybody has their own life to bring to it and their own perspective. And it's like, I fight this all the time with my love of Jerry Lewis. I love Jerry Lewis. Other people think he's a jerk and think his movies are not funny and annoying. Okay, you can have that opinion. That's fine. We're all right and we're all wrong. But the world is wrong about a lot of these things.
Yes. Well, and I think that would you agree with this? Like, I agree with you that if you don't like something, that's totally your opinion and you're right. But in general, my opinion is, if someone likes something and someone doesn't like something, I'm only interested in the conversation with the person who likes that thing.
Yeah.
I just feel like anyone if you don't like a thing that other people like, it doesn't matter how bad that thing is, you're the one missing out, and your opinion of it is probably going to be obvious, whereas the other person's opinion is going to be right, because they can watch this and you can do something else that you're excited about and tell me that.
Yeah.
That's how I'm going to approach this.
And I wouldn't even normally talk about Way We Were at all because I didn't like it, but because we're being completists on that podcast, we got to talk about everything. But for this podcast, we're going to only talk about stuff that we like, because I think it is easier to hate something, and it's much harder to find what's good in something, especially something difficult or something that everyone around you is telling you is bad. If you can find why Jack and Jill is brilliant, then that's like hard work, but it's worth it.
That's the one. I think that's the one everyone in the audience was thinking about when you were like, everyone? I want to go back. This is great. No, I have personally in my heart, I love Adam Sandler.
Yeah.
Like, I'm with you. And like, once you let someone in, you're going to love everything. I'm that kind of person. I think we're getting, we've left we've given the audience a really good sense of what they're in for. I think it's worth acknowledging that even though our lists are primarily white and male, I would say almost entirely, that I don't think that's by design. I think I would like for you to listen to that as us saying, this is who we are, and we're interested in all film, and excited to know about, I guess, because I'm just thinking for listeners, if you have films that you feel like the world is wrong about, that feel excluded because of our lists, that's more about us being honest about our blind spots and ignorance, and not because our lists are explicitly white supremacist and male. Sorry. Wait, did I lose you?
You cut out.
Oh, wow. You missed. That was great. You missed the one part that you wouldn't have liked, where I was just talking about the privilege that might seem implicit and exclusionary in our lists. And I just want to say for myself, and I think I know I speak for you, that we are open to, I think that's one of the things. I think if this goes well, people are going to listen to this and say, well, here's a film that the world is wrong about, and you're wrong about it because you don't have any, X, whatever, what kind of film on, and we're open to, we want to be, I think we want to be proven wrong about films that we're wrong or ignorant about, and we welcome every suggestion. There are no bad suggestions, and so I speak for both of us. Now, we promised something at the beginning of this episode, Brian. We had we teased it out. Everyone's been wanting. No, okay, Get out your cards. You wrote down what you think the follow-up to Destroy All Movies would be as a book. And now we're going to disclose what the follow-up is. Brian is well into working on it. Brian, will you now tell us the follow-up?
I'm working on the complete Emmanuel book. Every Emmanuel movie. For those who don't know what that is, they're like the 70s softcore porn movies for life. And they were the torch of that. They're the highest you can get. And there are hundreds of them. And I've spent 10 years tracking them down, and now I'm making a book. So, and I'm deep in the book, so don't anybody try to make their own quick one because they just heard I'm making one. So.
How many Emmanuel movies are there?
I think I'm at 300.
Okay, so, just to again, for those who are not familiar, because when you just said, I think people might have, you said softcore porn and their brains turned off.
They're erotic. It's like if 50 Shades of Grey was more well shot and less hate filled, then you'd have the Emmanuel movies. It's like a good sexual, journey, erotic awakening series. Nothing terribly graphic. It's totally R-rated now. In fact, it's like HBO show level. Like there's more graphic stuff on Game of Thrones than there is in the Emmanuel movie. And like watch them. If you haven't watched them, watch them. There's the Black Emmanuel movie with Laura Gemser, also great. Like they're all good. Check them out, and then buy my book in 8 years when it's done.
You heard it here first, folks. You have a title in mind?
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I had
so
Jim
good.
Shallot help me with that one.
Wow. Let's just go out. That's good night. No. Okay, so we should just say, I guess do we want to talk about, do you know what you're going to be covering in the first of our
Let's briefly
episodes?
talk about it.
Okay,
so we can tease them.
Well, so basically we definitely know what our first episode's going to be. So if you're listening to this, this will be the next one that comes out and you can get up to speed on it. It's a film. On the Pure Cinema podcast, they have this list, handshake films, like the films that when you meet someone who's a real cineast, this is the one that you say of like, you want to know me, you want to know this film. If you've seen this, we're friends. And if you haven't, then I am your friend telling you that you must see this film.
Yeah.
You ready? Larry Bishop's masterpiece, Mad Dog Time. You've never heard of this film? Maybe you heard of it under the title Trigger Happy. Yes, it's a film that is plagued with 2 titles, which never helps in the success of a film. But just look it up. It has the cast. What can you like? I'm so excited for this podcast. I'm not going to say anything because I have so much to say.
I don't think you need to. I think I just want to say you've never heard of it, but after you hear us talk about it, you're going to immediately try to find it because you won't believe it's real. Because it's too good to be true and too insane to be an actual thing that a human being made. Like it's going to be very, very exciting.
And just to make it even more exciting, because I just thought maybe I could, I used my IMDb Pro account to reach out to Larry Bishop's representatives to ask if he would answer a few questions, thinking that he might answer a few questions by email. But they responded saying, yeah, well, he might want to do your podcast. Send us your questions. And I sent him the questions, and I feel great pride in saying that he has agreed to do an interview. So we'll be following up our conversation with an interview with the director of this much deserving masterpiece that the world is wrong about.
Yeah.
And we're going to be so basically we're going to go back and forth. I'm going to pick one. You're going to pick one. Do you want to tell what yours is now?
It's a more recent movie, but it's a great movie. And it's one of those movies that I find most people haven't seen despite having very famous people in it, much like Mad Dog Time. But I want to do The Paperboy, the Lee Daniels masterpiece from just a few years ago. It is so good. I'm obsessed with it. And not a lot of people have seen it, which is real sad. and it's great.
I haven't seen it, so I'm excited.
Oh man.
Wow. Okay. So that's our first two. Oh, and we should also say, maybe we should have said this at the beginning, but ultimately this is a film podcast, but we give ourselves license on occasion to stretch that out to other things that the world is wrong about. Mostly cultural things. I think we're going to stick to. We're not going to have the world is wrong about. It's not a political podcast. If we opened it up to that, it would get pretty intense pretty quick. But cultural things, they don't necessarily. They could be. We could get into TV.
For sure.
We could get into music. I'm mostly excited to do film stuff because I don't have another film podcast like you do, and I didn't spend the last 10 years of my life working in a video store talking about movies. So my list of films that I'm excited to talk about is pretty long, but I know you have some things on your list that are not films, and I'm excited to get into those with you as well. Great. Well, I think we went a little bit past the time that you wanted to do, but I feel like this was worthwhile.
You know what? This is like when you first meet people, you gotta go long, and this audience hasn't met us yet. So when we get into the movies, I think we'll try to rein it a bit. But we're talking about every movie we love in one episode. Like, you need a lot of time, you know? Yeah, and as someone who listens to a lot of podcasts, I feel like we're not going to step on any of these other podcasts' toes, and I feel like we are bringing something unique to this that, I just think our lists, I'm very happy with how diverse our lists turned out to be, and how much agreement I have with everything that's on your list. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we don't have a sign off yet, Brian. Do you have an idea? You've already come up with some great ideas. So, do you have an idea for a sign off? Don't forget to get your pet spayed or neutered.
Don't forget that the world is wrong about you. It's okay, but that's why you're here, because if you love films that the world is wrong about, then there's some part of you that the world is wrong about. And this is a place where the world is wrong about. In this case, this episode's been The World is Wrong About Brian and Andras.
A true peace rally should cover the entire spectrum from extreme right to extreme left, as our next speaker proves. The president of the Young Communist League, she needs no introduction, Miss Katie Morosky.
I guess I do need an introduction.
Back up, Katie! Yeah, all the way to Moscow!
You can still take communion and like the Soviet Union.
What's cooking in the Kremlin, Katie?
The Kremlin is worried about the civil war in Spain, are you? Thousands of Spanish citizens are being bombed and machine gunned and murdered. Only one country is sending help. One country. The Soviet Union.
Katie, be my comrade.
Oh, Kay. What are you scared of? The Russians don't want anybody in Spain but the Spanish. Is that scary? They're communists, yes, but they want total disarmament now. Is that scary? Hitler and Mussolini are using the Spanish earth as testing ground for what they want. Another world war. Is that scary? You're darn right it is. There's only one thing to be scared of. And it's not me. It's not the Young Communist League. And it's not the Red Bogeyman. You be scared of anybody, any place, who will not stand up for world peace now.
Hi, I'm Brian.
And I'm AJ.
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall,
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, Can Francis Ford Coppola? Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
Subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.
Radio 8 Ball.
Andras here. When I'm not co-hosting The World is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8 Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8 Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
Show.